Hello crafty viewers, for today's project we are continuing on using the free flower and field paper from Stampin' Up, and it is part of the Saleabration promotion going on through February 28th. And this is paper that you can earn with a $50 purchase while you're watching this project. If you're inspired to make your own card and need supplies, I sure would appreciate it if you would shop in my online store. I'll put the link for that down in the show notes below. Now let's get started on today's card. So for today's card, we are going to be continuing to use some of the free papers out of the Flower and Field Designer Series paper that is part of Saleabration. Saleabration is going on through February 28th. It does not go through the end of March this year, which means that you have a little bit less than a week to earn this paper with a $50 purchase. So I am also going to use a top folding card out of white cardstock. I have a quarter sheet of So Saffron paper and a quarter sheet of cherry cobbler paper. To get started, all we need from this sheet is a little tiny square from one corner that is going to be cut to 2 3/8 of an inch by 2 3/8 of an inch. That will leave you a lot of cardstock left over to make a lot more cards. So this would be a card design that would be very easy to replicate if you needed to make cards in bulk. The other thing that I'm going to use is I am going to use the die that is the fourth from the largest die out of the stitched rectangle dies. And I am going to center that right in the middle of my cherry cobbler cardstock, because we're going to be using this cardstock. It's going to be covered up with the So Saffron cardstock, and therefore we can cut a piece right out of the middle and use that for the front of the card. I'll be right back. Okay, there we go. I have my piece cut out from there. And the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to be using the Painted Texture 3D embossing folder, and I'm going to be using that on this piece of So Saffron cardstock, and I'm going to run that through my embossing machine. And before I get started though, I am going to give it a spritz of water. Some of you have asked, why do I spray it a little bit with water? Well, this is a really deeply embossed embossing folder. And I find that when you just give it a light misting of water, like with a little Stampin' Spritzer, the embossing actually comes out a little deeper and a little bit better. It softens the fibers on the paper and it makes the embossing just a little crisper. So I'll be right back after I get that done. So off camera, I did also trim this down to 4 by 5 1/4, because that's going to give us a 1/8 inch reveal all around. To start with, I am going to adhere down our cherry cobbler paper onto our card base. And this does completely cover the front of the card, so there's not going to be anything left over just on the edges. So it does fully cover the front. And then I'm going to put down a good deal of adhesive to hold down our highly embossed paper. And that makes sure that there's a good connection with all that embossing. Now this does give an 1/8 of an inch reveal all around. Now we have the piece that we cut out of the middle of the cherry cobbler. And I can take our piece of the designer series paper, and again this was cut to 2 3/8 by 2 3/8. That also gives me a nice 1/8 of an inch reveal, which will show off that beautiful stitching. So let's adhere that down. Make sure that you got the flowers going in the right direction before you secure your cardstock onto your paper. Okay, I'll set that aside, and we are going to work on our sentiment. Now for this card, we're going to be stepping back into the annual catalog, and we're going to be using this giant thanks from Ornate Thanks, and I thought that the style of this actually went really well with the style of the paper. Some of the other thank you stamps were a little bit more scripty and were actually a little too large for this little tiny piece of paper. Now I really like to highlight that cherry cobbler, so I'm stamping this in some cherry cobbler ink. Center that right in the middle. And we can adhere this down as well. I like to cover up this little seam here, and so to do that I have some of the braided linen trim, and this is in Mossy Meadow, and this was part of the Dragonfly suite, and I absolutely love the linen trim. What you generally don't see on camera is me struggling to tie a nice neat bow, and so for me this linen trim is something I will actually tie a bow on camera. So I'm going to put a little bit of adhesive down on the back to kind of tack it down a little bit. And that will help keep it in place. And this is cut to 16.5 inches long. And before we tie that, I am actually going to use some dimensionals to adhere this onto the front of the card. Now this will go right in the middle of the card. We can tie our bow. And I kind of want it off to the side here. To make it a little bit easier to tie your bow, you can add a little tiny mini glue dot, and that will help keep the toe line in place. It also keeps it so it's centered right over your seam in your paper. And there is our completed card. I hope you enjoyed today's project. If you did and are interested in buying product in order to win or earn the free paper here, I sure would appreciate it if you would shop in my online store. The link for that is down in the show notes below. Thanks and have a great day. Bye-bye.